Here's something that sounds impossible. FIFA doesn't own a single team. It doesn't sell a single jersey to you directly. It doesn't even play in the tournament. And yet, it's on track to make around $13 billion in just 4 years. That's more money than some entire countries generate in a year. Today, we're breaking down exactly how an organization that technically calls itself a non-profit ends up sitting on one of the biggest piles of cash in all of sports, and where every single dollar of it actually goes. Quick basics first. FIFA is the organization that runs world football globally, including the World Cup. Think of it like the NFL's league office. Except instead of running one country's football, it oversees the sport across basically every nation on Earth. FIFA doesn't operate on a normal calendar year. It runs in 4-year blocks, called cycles, always ending with a men's World Cup. That single detail explains almost everything else about how their money works. Here's the part that surprises people. FIFA's revenue swings wildly depending on the year. In a random non-World Cup year, it might bring in a few $100 million. In an actual World Cup year, that number explodes into the billions almost overnight. It's like a business that does modest sales for 3 years straight, then has one single month where it does 10 times its normal annual revenue. That's essentially how FIFA's entire financial model works. So where does all this money actually come from? The single biggest source, by far, is broadcasting rights. This means TV networks and streaming platforms paying enormous sums just for the right to air World Cup matches. For the 4-year cycle that ended with the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, broadcasting alone brought in roughly $3.4 billion, which is about 45% of everything FIFA earned in that entire cycle. For the current cycle, ending with the 2026 World Cup, broadcasting is projected to bring in around $3.9 billion just from the tournament itself. Here's a comparison to put that in perspective. That's more than most professional sports leagues make from broadcasting in an entire year, generated from watching one single month-long event. Why does broadcasting matter so much? Because the World Cup is one of the only events on the planet that gets watched by close to half the world's population across its run. Advertisers and networks are essentially paying for access to the single largest television audience in human history. When something has that much attention, the price tag for the rights to show it becomes almost unbelievable. Second major source, sponsorships. Companies like Coca-Cola, Visa, and Adidas pay FIFA enormous fees to have their brand associated with the tournament. For the 2026 cycle, sponsorship revenue is expected to land somewhere between $1.8 and $2.8 billion. Here's an interesting wrinkle most fans never notice. Over half of FIFA's current commercial partners are headquartered in the United States, largely because the 2026 tournament is being co-hosted by the US, Canada, Mexico, and American companies want maximum exposure on their home turf. Third, ticket sales and hospitality packages, meaning premium seating and experience deals sold directly to fans and companies. For Qatar 2022, this brought in around $929 million. For 2026, thanks to an expanded field of 48 teams instead of 32, and 104 total matches instead of 64, that number is projected to hit close to $3 billion, more than triple the previous tournament. More teams simply means more matches, which means more tickets, which means more money, almost like adding extra rounds to a playoff bracket just to sell more seats. Fourth, licensing. This covers video games, merchandise, and collectibles carrying the official FIFA World Cup branding. This stream alone brought in around $769 million in the last completed cycle. Every jersey, every video game, every official product with that World Cup logo sends a cut back to FIFA. Add it all together, and here's the number that should genuinely surprise you. FIFA's total revenue for the current 4-year cycle, ending with the 2026 World Cup, is now projected at roughly $13 billion. That's a 72% jump compared to the previous cycle that ended with Qatar in 2022. Of that entire $13 billion, close to $8.9 billion is expected to come directly from the 2026 World Cup alone, making it, by a wide margin, the most lucrative single tournament FIFA has ever run. Now here's the twist that trips people up. FIFA legally operates as a non-profit organization. That sounds like it shouldn't be making billions in the first place. But non-profit doesn't mean no money. It means FIFA isn't allowed to hand out profits to shareholders like a normal company would. Instead, that money gets funneled back into running the sport, funding federations, and organizing future tournaments. Think of it less like a corporation paying out dividends, and more like a massive foundation that just happens to generate absurd amounts of cash every 4 years. So where does the money actually go once it comes in? A meaningful chunk goes straight to the teams themselves. For 2026, roughly $652 million is being paid out directly to participating national teams as prize money, covering both guaranteed appearance payments and performance-based bonuses. Another significant slice goes towards something called FIFA Forward, a development program that sends direct funding to football federations all around the world, including smaller countries that could never generate this kind of money on their own. Under the current program, each member federation can receive up to $8 million over 4 years, plus additional support for smaller, less wealthy federations. It's roughly 7 times more development funding than FIFA provided a decade earlier. Beyond that, FIFA covers massive operational costs. Running a 48-team tournament across 16 host cities in 3 different countries isn't cheap. FIFA's own operating expenditure for the 2026 tournament sits at close to $3.76 billion, covering everything from venue management to broadcasting production to basic administration. Here's the bigger picture worth sitting with. Every time the World Cup expands, adding more teams, more matches, more countries, FIFA's entire revenue engine scales up alongside it. The jump from 32 to 48 teams for 2026 isn't just about giving more nations a chance to compete. It's also, quite directly, about creating more inventory FIFA can sell to broadcasters, sponsors, and fans. More matches literally means more money, and the two goals, growing the sport and growing the bank account, happen to line up perfectly. Quick recap before we wrap up. FIFA makes most of its money through 4 channels: broadcasting rights, sponsorships, ticketing and hospitality, and licensing. Broadcasting alone is the single biggest piece of the pie. The current 4-year cycle, capped off by the expanded 2026 World Cup, is projected to bring in roughly $13 billion, a record for the organization. And despite being legally structured as a non-profit, that money funds everything from player prize pools to development programs supporting football federations across the entire planet. Here's the final thought worth remembering. The World Cup isn't just the biggest event in football. It's one of the most efficient money machines in the history of sports, built entirely around a tournament that only happens once every 4 years, and getting bigger and more profitable every single time it comes back around. If breakdowns like this make the business side of football finally make sense, subscribe, because this channel turns the biggest stories in the sport into something anyone can actually understand.